The microphone is old, the studio is hot, but the harmony is perfect. Three voices blend together, creating a sound that will echo for generations. But the most iconic sounds in reggae came from bands that were barely paid and often forgotten. How did a group of friends accidentally invent a new style of music? Why is the most sampled reggae band also the least known? Let's give credit where it's long overdue. 1. The Gladiators. When you think of classic roots reggae, you probably picture a single charismatic frontman backed by a faceless band. Many people are crazy about that iconic image. The Gladiators, led by the soulful Albert Griffiths, seemed to fit that mold perfectly. They had the raw, spiritual sound that defined the golden age of Jamaican music in the 1970s, with songs about struggle and hope. But not all things are what they seem. The thing nobody tells you is that the Gladiators were one of the first truly self-contained bands in reggae. Unlike most groups at the time who relied on legendary studio session players, the Gladiators played their own instruments. To put it mildly, this was a revolutionary act. What many overlooked is that this gave them a unique, tight-knit sound that was all their own. Their bass lines, played by Clinton Fearon, were funky and hypnotic, creating a groove that was instantly recognizable. Their harmonies were raw and honest, sounding less like a polished vocal group and more like real voices from the heart of Jamaica. They were a true band in every sense of the word, writing, arranging, and performing their own music from the ground up. This self-sufficient model inspired countless other groups to pick up their own instruments and forge their own sound, proving that a band could be more than just a singer and some backup players. They laid down a blueprint for what a real reggae band could be. From a band that played all their own instruments, we moved to a group whose lead singer laid down the bass lines for almost everyone else. 2. The Heptones. The Heptones were masters of the smooth, soulful sound of rocksteady, the cool and romantic music that came right before reggae. With their silky smooth three-part harmonies, they were one of the most popular vocal groups of their time. They seemed destined to be remembered as kings of a bygone era, a footnote in the story of reggae's birth. However, there's a surprising twist to their story. The real secret to their influence was their lead singer, Leroy Sibbles. You see, Leroy wasn't just a golden-voiced frontman. He was also one of the most important bass players in Jamaican history. As a session musician for the legendary Studio One, he created some of the most iconic and enduring bass lines, or riddims, of the era. What many overlooked is that these bass lines became the very foundation upon which hundreds of other reggae songs were built. When the Heptones made the jump from rocksteady to the newer, tougher sound of reggae, Leroy's bass playing led the charge. He slowed down the tempo and made the bass heavier and more pronounced, helping to invent the signature one-drop rhythm that defines reggae. Their song, Equal Rights, wasn't just a powerful message, it was a musical statement, a bridge from the old sound to the new. Their influence was so deep, it touched nearly every artist of their time. But while they sang of equal rights, our next band sang in a language few understood, creating the most spiritual anthem in reggae history. 3. The Abyssinians. In the world of reggae, many bands sang about their Rastafarian faith, but most did it in a way that was easy for a mainstream audience to understand. The Abyssinians, with their haunting and mystical sound, seemed like a deep and spiritual group, but one among many. They were known for their unique harmonies, but on the surface, they were just another roots reggae trio. But the reality is much deeper. The secret to their revolutionary sound came from their connection to Ethiopia and the ancient language of Amharic. Their most famous song, Sada Masagana, which translates to Give Thanks, wasn't just another reggae tune. It was a hymn, a piece of music so spiritually authentic that it felt like it was channeled from another time and place. The thing nobody tells you is that the song's melody was built around a minor key, which was almost unheard of in the upbeat world of Jamaican music at the time. This gave it a dark, somber, and deeply moving quality that stood out from everything else. This wasn't just music for dancing, it was music for meditation. The song was so revolutionary that at first, no producer wanted to release it. The band had to press it themselves, and it became an underground sensation. Sada Masagana created a new lane for spiritual reggae, proving that the music could be a vehicle for profound religious expression. They created a sound that was almost holy. But our next band took three voices and turned them into a diamond-hard force of nature. 4. The Mighty Diamonds. Vocal trios were the heart and soul of reggae's golden age, and the Mighty Diamonds were among the best. With their perfect, polished harmonies, they could sing about love one minute and social justice the next. They were masters of their craft, known for their smooth delivery and timeless songs. They seemed like the perfect example of a classic roots harmony group, but their real genius was in their unique vocal chemistry. The most shocking fact is how they blended their voices. Donald "Tabby" Shaw had a soulful and emotive lead. Fitzroy "Bunny" Simpson provided a rich and mellow harmony, and Lloyd "Judge" Ferguson anchored it all with a tough, almost militant baritone. This combination allowed them to tackle any subject with incredible versatility. They could be smooth and romantic on one track, then fiery and righteous on the next. They were one of the first groups to successfully bridge the gap between heavy roots reggae and the emerging more romantic style of lovers rock. Their biggest hit, "Pass the Kochi," was a celebration of community and sharing, but its infectious rhythm and catchy chorus made it a global phenomenon, even after it was famously covered and changed to "Pass the Dutchie." Their ability to be both tough and tender set a new standard for vocal groups. But long before them, one man's voice was a force of nature that helped shape the very beginnings of the music. 5. Justin Hinds and the Dominoes. Justin Hinds was one of the giants of the ska era, the upbeat, horn-driven music that came before reggae. With his powerful, commanding voice and lyrics that often sounded like proverbs from the Bible, he was a true original. But as ska faded and the slower, cooler sound of rocksteady took over, many of his contemporaries disappeared. It would have been easy to write him off as a star from a past generation. However, Justin Hinds and his harmony group, the Dominoes, made the transition to the new reggae sound in a way that few others could. To put it mildly, his voice was an instrument of raw power. What many overlooked is how his rural, folk-like storytelling style brought a different flavor to reggae. While many artists in Kingston were singing about city life, Justin Hinds sang about history, morality, and the struggles of the common man with a wisdom that felt ancient. His songs like "Travel with Love" were not just songs, they were lessons delivered with a passion and intensity that was unmatched. He was a bridge between the old and the new, a foundation stone upon which much of modern reggae was built. He was a true Jamaican original. But what happens when the next generation of reggae pioneers aren't from Jamaica at all? 6. Groundation. For many reggae fans, the 1990s were a strange time. The classic roots sound had given way to digital dancehall, and many thought the era of live, organic reggae bands was over. So, when a band named Groundation emerged from Northern California, most people didn't pay them much attention. They were just another American band trying to play Jamaican music. But this was no ordinary tribute band. The thing nobody tells you is that Groundation was made up of formally trained jazz musicians from Sonoma State University. They didn't just play reggae. They deconstructed it and rebuilt it with the complex harmonies and improvisational fire of jazz. Their sound was a wild fusion of the deep, dub-heavy rhythms of classic roots reggae and the sophisticated, free-flowing spirit of artists like John Coltrane. Each song was a journey, with complex horn arrangements, intricate keyboard solos, and a level of musicianship that was simply unheard of in contemporary reggae. They single-handedly revived the art of live dubbing on stage, where the band would create new versions of their songs in real time, just like the legendary Jamaican studio engineers of the 70s. Groundation created a new, progressive branch of reggae that inspired a whole generation of musicians around the world. They took reggae to college, but our next band took it on a wild psychedelic trip. 7. Giant Panda Gorilla Dub Squad. The name alone is a mouthful, Giant Panda Gorilla Dub Squad. Hailing from Rochester, New York, they were another American band that fell in love with Jamaican music. They built a following by playing relentless live shows, often to small but dedicated crowds. On the surface, they looked like just another jam band, mixing reggae rhythms with long improvised solos. However, there was something different going on here. To put it mildly, their sound was a full-blown psychedelic experience. What many overlooked is how they took the core elements of dub music, the heavy bass, the echoing drums, the spacey sound effects, and pushed them to their absolute limits. They blended the deep meditative grooves of dub with the swirling, mind-bending textures of psychedelic rock. Their live shows were legendary, not just for their musical skill, but for their ability to create a hypnotic atmosphere that was both high energy and deeply trance-inducing. They were masters of creating a soundscape, using layers of reverb and delay to make the music feel like it was coming from another dimension. This unique fusion of dub and psychedelia created a new sound for American reggae and influenced a wave of bands that followed. They made reggae for the mind. But our next band took it to the heart of Washington, D.C. and turned it into a global movement. 8. Soja Soldiers of Jah Army. When a group of high school friends from Arlington, Virginia started a reggae band called Soja, nobody expected them to become one of the biggest reggae acts in the world. After all, they were thousands of miles away from Jamaica, and their sound was as much influenced by rock bands like Pearl Jam as it was by Bob Marley. They seemed like an unlikely candidate to carry the torch of conscious reggae music, but their unique background was their secret weapon. The thing nobody tells you is that Soja's genius was in their ability to translate the core messages of roots reggae for a new global audience. They took the themes of peace, love, unity, and social justice that were central to classic reggae and presented them in a way that resonated with young people all over the world. Their music blended classic reggae rhythms with the anthemic sing-along choruses of modern rock, creating a sound that was both familiar and fresh. What many overlooked is how they became international ambassadors for the music, selling out huge venues in places like Brazil and Hawaii, where they became superstars. They proved that the message of reggae was universal and that you didn't have to be from Jamaica to feel its power. They took the message global. But our next band never had a hit song of their own, yet they played on almost every hit you've ever heard. 9. The Roots Radics. In the world of reggae, the spotlight is almost always on the singer. The backing band, no matter how talented, is often just a footnote. The Roots Radics were the ultimate example of this. They were a group of session musicians who, to the general public, were completely anonymous. They were the ghosts in the machine, the invisible engine powering the hits. But here is the absolutely mind-blowing truth. For a period in the late 1970s and early 1980s, the Roots Radics were the sound of reggae. To put it mildly, they were the most important and influential band in Jamaica. The thing nobody tells you is that they created a new, heavier, and more militant style of playing that became the foundation for the emerging dancehall sound. Led by the powerhouse rhythm section of bassist Errol Flabba, Holt and drummer Lincoln Style Scott, they created rhythms that were so powerful and infectious that they became instant classics. Their sound was tough, stripped down, and built for the dance hall. They were the backing band for legendary artists like Gregory Isaacs, Bunny Wailer, and Barrington Levy, playing on literally hundreds of hit songs. They were the architects of a new era. But while they were creating the sound of the future in the city, another band was digging deep into the past in the countryside. 10. Roots Underground. By the early 2000s, many people felt that Jamaican reggae had lost some of its raw spiritual fire. The sound had become more polished, more produced, and some of the ancient, mystical energy seemed to be missing. So when a new band called Roots Underground emerged from Kingston, they seemed like a breath of fresh air, a return to the classic sounds of the 70s. But they weren't just copying the old masters. The most shocking fact about Roots Underground is how they reconnected modern reggae with its deepest African roots. They were pioneers in reintroducing the heavy, hypnotic rhythms of Nyabingi drumming into their music. Nyabingi is the sacred drumming style of the Rastafari movement, a deeply spiritual and ceremonial music that is rarely heard in a modern band setting. Roots Underground made it a centerpiece of their sound, blending its ancient, heartbeat-like pulse with electric guitars and powerful vocals. Their live shows were legendary for their explosive energy, feeling less like a concert and more like a spiritual revival. They reminded a new generation of where the music came from, proving that the ancient rhythms were still as powerful as ever. They brought the ancient drums back. But our next band, from the other side of the world, brought a new kind of soul to the music. 11. Mellow Mood. When you think of authentic, world-class reggae, you probably don't think of a pair of twin brothers from a small town in Italy. Mellow Mood, led by twins Jacopo and Lorenzo Garzia, seemed like an unlikely success story. They were a European band playing Jamaican music, a formula that often results in a watered-down, unconvincing imitation. But here's the kicker. Mellow Mood didn't just imitate reggae, they mastered it. To put it mildly, their sound is so authentically Jamaican that many listeners are shocked to learn they are from Italy. The thing nobody tells you is that their secret is their deep love and respect for the foundations of the music, combined with a unique, soulful sensibility that is all their own. They sing in both English and Jamaican patois with a fluency that is astounding, and their rhythms are as tight and heavy as anything coming out of Kingston. What many overlooked is how they infused their music with a touch of Italian soul, a certain melodic and emotional quality that gives their songs a unique flavor. They became one of the biggest reggae acts in Europe, proving that the spirit of reggae was a global phenomenon that could be nurtured anywhere. They took reggae to Italy. But our next band took it to the American suburbs and mixed it with punk rock. 12. Ballyhoo. The laid-back, sun-drenched vibe of reggae and the fast, aggressive energy of punk rock seem like they come from two different planets. So when a band called Ballyhoo from Aberdeen, Maryland, started blending these two sounds, most people didn't know what to make of it. They weren't quite a reggae band, and they weren't quite a punk band. They were something new and different. But this strange combination was their secret to changing the game. You see, Ballyhoo was one of the pioneers of the modern reggae rock sound that exploded in the United States. What many overlooked is how they took the upbeat, melodic hooks of pop-punk and fused them with the offbeat rhythms and heavy bass of reggae. The result was a sound that was incredibly catchy, high energy, and perfect for a new generation of fans who grew up listening to both Bob Marley and bands like Blink-182. Their songs were full of sunny, feel-good vibes, but they also had the driving energy of a rock show. This fusion of styles created a new and exciting lane for American reggae, influencing countless bands that came after them. They mixed punk energy with reggae vibes. But our next band focused on just one thing, making you feel good. 13. Ashes of Babylon. In a genre that often focuses on heavy social commentary and spiritual struggle, sometimes the simplest message is the most powerful. Ashes of Babylon, a band from Austin, Texas, seemed like a nice, pleasant group, but they didn't have the militant edge or the deep, mystical vibe of many other reggae acts. They were just a group of guys who loved to play positive, uplifting music, but their simplicity was their strength. To put it mildly, their music is pure sunshine. The thing nobody tells you is that their contribution was to perfect the art of feel-good reggae. They took the smooth grooves of classic roots and blended them with a pop sensibility that was impossible to resist. Their songs, like Feelin' Good, were all about positivity, love, and living in the moment. In a world full of heavy news, their music was an escape, a reminder of the simple joys of life. What many overlooked is how they helped to carve out a space for a lighter, more carefree style of reggae that focused on universal themes of happiness and connection. They spread good vibes, but our next band took reggae on a trip around the world, all in one song. 14. Jamaram. For a long time, reggae was seen as a very specific sound from a very specific place. But as the music spread across the globe, artists began to mix it with their own local flavors. Jamaram, a band from Germany, seemed like just another example of this global fusion, a fun party band that blended reggae with other styles. However, their approach was far more radical than most. The most shocking fact is the sheer number of styles they could cram into a single song. To put it mildly, their music is a whirlwind tour of the world's rhythms. One moment you're hearing a classic reggae beat, the next it shifts into a fiery Latin salsa, then it might morph into an African funk groove or a Balkan brass band breakdown. They treated reggae not as a rigid style, but as a flexible foundation upon which they could build almost anything. What many overlooked is how this fearless approach to fusion pushed the boundaries of what a reggae band could be. They proved that the music was a truly global language that could be blended with any other dialect to create something new and exciting. They turned reggae into a global passport. But while they were partying in Germany, a band in England was starting a revolution. 15. Steel Pulse. When reggae exploded in the United Kingdom in the 1970s, many British bands simply tried to copy the sound of their Jamaican heroes. Steel Pulse, from a tough neighborhood in Birmingham, seemed to be following that path. They were a group of young men with dreadlocks, singing about their Rastafarian faith with a heavy, rootsy sound. But not all things are what they seem. The thing nobody tells you is that Steel Pulse gave British reggae its own unique and powerful voice. They weren't just copying Jamaican music, they were adapting it to their own reality. What many overlooked is that their experience as the children of Caribbean immigrants in a sometimes hostile Britain gave their music a different kind of edge. Their lyrics were fiercely political, tackling issues of racism and injustice with a directness and anger that was shocking at the time. Their album, Handsworth Revolution, was a landmark, a militant call to action that became an anthem for a generation. They blended the deep grooves of roots reggae with the raw energy of punk rock, creating a sound that was uniquely British. They gave British reggae its voice. But another UK band was about to give it its heart. 16. Matumbi. While bands like Steel Pulse were fighting the system with their militant sound, another movement was quietly bubbling up in the British reggae scene. Matumbi was at the forefront of this new style. With their smooth, soulful vocals and romantic lyrics, they seemed like a much softer, less serious version of their reggae contemporaries. But their softer sound was a revolution in itself. You see, Matumbi were one of the key architects of a brand new subgenre called lovers rock. This was a style of reggae that moved away from political and spiritual themes and focused almost exclusively on stories of love and relationships. To put it mildly, it was a sound designed for slow dancing in a dimly lit club. The thing nobody tells you is how important this was for the Caribbean community in Britain. It was a sound that spoke directly to their experiences, blending the sweet harmonies of American soul music with the gentle rhythms of reggae. What many overlooked is that lovers rock gave British reggae its own romantic identity, a style that was completely distinct from the tougher sounds coming out of Jamaica. They created the soundtrack for romance. But back in Jamaica, our next band was creating a soundtrack for a history lesson. 17. Knowledge. Many roots reggae bands sang about history and culture, but often in broad, sweeping terms. The band Knowledge, from the heart of Kingston, seemed to fit this mold. They were a group of young Rastafarians with a classic, raw sound, singing songs about their heritage and their faith. They were one of many talented groups in a very crowded scene. However, their approach to history was what made them truly special. The most shocking fact about Knowledge is the incredible depth and detail of their lyrics. They weren't just singing vague praises of Africa, they were telling specific stories from the history of the African diaspora. Their songs were like musical history lessons filled with names, dates, and events that brought the past to life. They sang about the struggles and triumphs of their ancestors with an academic precision that was unheard of. What many overlooked is how this focus on detailed, authentic storytelling deepened the educational and cultural power of reggae music. They weren't just entertainers, they were teachers using their music to pass down knowledge to a new generation. They turned reggae into a history book. But our next band wrote a book of harmonies that would be read for decades. 18. The Wailing Souls. In the incredible musical melting pot of 1970s Jamaica, you had to be special to survive. The Wailing Souls were more than just special, they were survivors. They started their career at the legendary Studio One in the rocksteady era and managed to stay relevant through the roots reggae explosion and the dawn of dancehall. They were known for their beautiful, intricate harmonies, a testament to their incredible talent. But their real, underrated genius was their incredible adaptability. You see, most vocal groups from the rocksteady era couldn't make the transition to the tougher, more political sound of roots reggae. The Wailing Souls didn't just adapt, they thrived. What many overlooked is how they were able to change their vocal style to fit the times without ever losing their signature sound. They could be sweet and soulful one moment, then tough and righteous the next. They worked with all the great producers from Coxsone Dodd to Henry Junjo Laws, and they always sounded perfectly at home. This amazing versatility made them one of the most enduring and consistently brilliant vocal groups in reggae history. They could sing anything, but our next band sang like they were communicating with another world. 19. The Congos. By the late 1970s, roots reggae had reached a creative peak. The sound was deep, spiritual, and powerful. But even in this crowded field of geniuses, the Congos managed to create something utterly unique. Their album, Heart of the Congos, produced by the legendary madman Lee Scratch Perry, is often hailed as one of the greatest reggae albums of all time, a masterpiece of mystical, otherworldly sound. But here's the kicker. The thing nobody tells you is what makes that album so special. It's the voice of their lead singer, Cedric Myton. To put it mildly, his soaring, ethereal falsetto sounds less like a human voice and more like a spirit crying out from the wilderness. It's a sound that is both beautiful and unsettling, a pure expression of spiritual ecstasy. Lee Perry surrounded that incredible voice with one of the deepest, murkiest, and most hypnotic productions ever created. The bass is so low it feels like it's coming from the center of the earth, and the drums are drenched in so much echo and reverb they sound like they were recorded in an underwater cave. What many overlooked is how this combination of a one-of-a-kind voice and a genius producer created a sound that has never been duplicated. They made music that sounded like a dream. But our final band created a dream of a perfect day that became a reggae standard. 20. The Paragons. Before reggae, there was rocksteady. And at the heart of rocksteady were the Paragons. Led by the incredible songwriter and vocalist John Holt, they were masters of the romantic ballad. Their smooth harmonies and tales of love and heartbreak made them one of the most beloved groups of their era. They were superstars of a sound that was about to be replaced by the harder edge of reggae. But their influence would echo for decades. The thing nobody tells you is that the Paragons wrote and recorded a song that would become one of the most famous and beloved riddims in all of reggae history. That song was On the Beach. Its simple, beautiful melody and melancholic feel captured a perfect, timeless mood. What many overlooked is that the instrumental version of this song, the rhythm, became a foundation upon which countless other artists would build their own hits. From the 1960s all the way to the present day, singers and DJs have been recording new songs over that classic Paragons rhythm. They didn't just write a hit song. They created a piece of reggae's DNA, a musical building block that would be used to tell new stories for generations to come.